All righty. We're going to get comfortable and settle in for tonight's talk. And I want to say hello again to everybody. I am known as Analysis, and I welcome you on behalf of the entire team to Red Emma's Bookstore Coffee House in our brand new location. So before we do anything else, what do you think?
Awesome.
Willow, good? Excellent, excellent. We're so glad to have you take what actually is kind of a sneak peek at our new location. Our doors will be opening for real very soon. Over the next few weeks, we have a few more things in that wacky, wild, wonderful world known as paperwork to take care of. But as soon as we do that, we look forward to opening doors. As you know, we are as you may know, and some of you may not know this, we are a worker-owned collective that began in 2004 at a small location further downtown. This is our fourth location, and this is the first one that we have actually owned. We purchased this building that you are in now, and of course this will be our event space and our main cafe where you'll be able to order food, and we'll have a wonderful vegan menu for you in a few weeks. If you noticed over there that there was a partition, that goes into our second building. It's attached, and then you'll be able to enter from this side or 32nd Street. That, in another month or so, will be our bookstore. All right, it's being renovated now, and that'll be a nice, newly designed split-level bookstore. And the 8,000 books that are downstairs right now, we will haul them all upstairs, all right? And you can run rampant, all right, and bring everybody. When we open doors, you'll be able to go downstairs and run rampant. So don't worry. I know you're book starved. You're waiting for us to reopen so you get at these books. We have them all downstairs, and you'll be able to do that until we bring them upstairs. And it's going to be a whole lot of fun. And it really will be enjoyable. But we are already, as you see, starting book events because we did not want to hold that up anymore. And we have so many dynamic authors that are coming through this fall. And I'm going to tell you just about a couple of things that are happening because even as soon as this Saturday, we have a dynamic event coming up. How many of you like to imagine the future and what it can be and what it's going to be? Good. You should get here Saturday at 7 p.m. Emmy O'Brien will be talking about everything for everyone. And in that, she actually imagines about 50 years in the future what the New York Commune would like. Some of you are familiar with the history of the Paris Commune. Emmy O'Brien imagines the New York Commune, all right, and what a future history of that will be. So that will be this Saturday at 7 p.m. Coming up Wednesday at 7 p.m., Dorothy Roberts, many of you familiar with Killing the Black Body. Brand new from Dorothy Roberts, Torn Apart, How the Child Welfare System Destroys Black Families and How Abolition Can Build a Safer World. I need so many city officials and public officials and everybody else to be here Wednesday night, and I need to figure out how to get them here because that is an important subject that we need to examine. The following night, this coming Thursday, all right, a week from tonight on the 29th, 7 p.m., Psalm 1 is in the house, all right? Christelle Bowen, better known in the hip-hop world as Psalm 1, she will be here with her new book, Her Word is Bond, and she will be in conversation. Well, I should say first that she is going to discuss not only her history in hip-hop, but how that history has meant navigating what can be a very misogynist culture and industry. That's going to be very interesting. She will be in conversation with a dynamic young talent here in Baltimore by the name of Martina Lynch, a hip-hop artist and poet herself. And so that is going to be very, very cool. Martina might even actually be walking through here before the end of the night. So that is going to be Thursday. Plenty of more things. Please go to redemmas.org, redemmas.org. Go to our events tab, and you can see all of that. You can check out the About tab, which gives you a history of this radical left anarchist-founded, independent, indie bookstore, worker collective, worker-owned thing. It's your favorite one in Baltimore. Why? Because it's your only one in Baltimore. So, y'all ready to get started? That's good. That's good. How many of you ever had a conversation with anybody about scraps from the table? Anybody had that conversation? And many of us have, because certainly I have used it as a metaphor, as an example in terms of what we as an African diaspora, as an oppressed people, have had to go through in this country, taking the scraps from the table, referencing what we ate in enslaved times and oppressed times, and being able to survive and do something with that. And I've always used it as a metaphor. I believe this Dear Sister tonight is going to push us a little bit on that particular imagery and give us a polemic in terms of not only what that means, but the way that same African diaspora is viewed in this culture vis-a-vis the lens of food, I have not had a chance to dive deeply into the book, but even what I've had a chance to touch base into, I mean, there are questions popping in my mind that look like there's so many interesting things, so we're going to get right into it. Dr. Psyche Williams-Forson is a professor of American Studies down in College Park, the University of Maryland, College Park. Previous book, I love the title of this. Now check this now. Wait a minute, I want to get it to you right. Building Houses Out of Chicken Legs. Right. Black Women, Food, and Power. You got to touch on that a little bit somewhere in the I know they overlap, yeah. And just the title alone, but I'm feeling that. Okay. As a poet, I'm feeling that. Okay. All right, we can run with that. All right, we can go with that. So much to talk about, so we're going to get right into it. I need y'all to make some real, honest to goodness, real radical Red Emma's noise for Professor Psyche Williams-Forson.
Thank you.
Presenting her new book, Eating While Black, Food
Black.
Shaming,
Yes.
and Race in America. Let's just take it, I mean, right from there, from the title. Okay. What was in your mind as you named it?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. I want to thank all of you all for coming out, especially my McDaniel crew, who's my previous fam up in Westminster, and I'm thankful you all came down or came over to chat with me tonight. So, Eating While Black started after Building Houses Out of Chicken Legs, okay? I wrote Building Houses Out of Chicken Legs as my doctoral thesis, and I started out thinking about stereotypes of black people and chicken, right? I was doing that when I was at McDaniel. And what had happened was that Tiger Woods won the Masters for the first time, and Fuzzy Zeller, one of his fellow golfers, made this comment about don't order fried chicken or collard greens or whatever the hell those people eat, right? Because you could order, in addition to getting the green jacket and the accolade, you could select your menu for your celebratory dinner. So that happened, and also the NCAA at that time had an advertisement with a hip-hop colonel. I don't know if you all remember this. So I heard this commercial, and then I ran in the room and saw these basketballs on stage, and so I was like, are black people, why do we have this black hip-hop voice? He's doing the Cabbage Patch, which was the dance that was very popular in the black community. And I said, why are black people still being associated with the stereotype of chicken? And this was in 2000, right? So I back then Google wasn't a thing, but I interneted, you know, black people and chicken, and I started getting all these images, most of which were sold on eBay and probably still are. So I found sheet music and greeting cards and just all of these horrendous images that were beautiful and problematic, but were being described as cute and funny and so forth. So I started writing the dissertation around that. My advisor, colleague, and friend is here with me, and she remembers this. And at some point, I got into this project, and I was like, I'm tired. I can't continue to read about black people being victimized or accused of being victims, right? And so I saw this picture that someone had given me of these women with these platters of chicken and other food stuff at the train. And I was like, okay, what's going on here? Because this wasn't a reenactment photograph. It was an original image. And when I tracked it, it was from Gordonsville, Virginia, in Orange County. And I went down and found out that there was a whole black female entrepreneurial enterprise in the late 1800s. of selling food at the train station. And that's how these women made their livelihood. One of the women had given an interview for the centennial of the community, and she said, "My mother built our house out of chicken legs." She said the first one burnt down and then she rebuilt it. And I was like, that's the story right there. How do black people do things with chicken that don't involve stereotypes, right? And so that's what building houses is about. I do look at the stereotypes, but then I move past them because it's important for us to remember them. But then I move on to the ways that black women have played the dozens in church kitchens, and the way that we have contributed to cookbooks even though our ideas have been stolen, the way that Chris Rock talks about the big piece of chicken, the artwork of Kara Walker, right? And so all of these fascinating things that we have done. So that's where building houses to chicken legs comes from. So while I was giving talks and engaging people about the book, a lot of things were happening in the food world. For one, dollar stores started getting refrigeration. Right? I would go to the Dollar Tree a lot because my daughter was maybe 4 and she always had a birthday party, and I was going in the dollar store grabbing stuff. And I was like, oh wow, who's buying food from the dollar store? Because they started getting orange juice and eggs and bacon and other foodstuffs, bread. And then I said, why aren't we encouraging people to buy food from the dollar store, right? And so what I was hearing from people is, how do we get, mostly white folks, how do we get people to build their own garden? And I was like, okay, what's happening here? And it always tended to be a very moralistic comment, right? Like, the best thing you can do is grow your own food. Well, for whom, right? Different races and ethnicities have different relationships to land, right? Black folks were not given 40 acres and a mule, and we've had our land taken from us. So while some of us want to return to gardening and farming, there are many others who that's not something that they relish doing, right? So I started seeing that, and then a story appeared in the Washington Post of a young African-American girl alongside a host of other children about obesity. And the story caught my eye because, again, I have a young daughter. And as I looked at the story, and I looked at the photo set of images, and there are many, it was very much about reshaming this young girl who they claimed to be protecting by telling her story. She would get teased in school. She was 12, but she was tall, she was heavy-set, and very dark-skinned. So they said her friends would call her King Kong, and she would be ashamed to eat in the cafeteria. So I started looking into this story, and there was an image that had her picking raw broccoli out of a salad. And then there was another image of her eating ham, chicken, mac and cheese, collard greens, and they basically were saying, this is not what you should be eating. You should be eating the salad. And so I was working on this piece called You Don't Have to Give Up the Corn Pudding, to talk about moving away from thinking in terms of either or, right? We should not have to think about our food cultures in dichotomies. And then the last thing that happened with this book is a couple of years ago, and I start the book with this scenario. A DC Metro worker was on the train coming or going from work, and she was eating, and an artist or author took a picture of the woman on the train, right? And I'm not going to read all of it, of course, but I do want to read what she wrote because it's the opening of the book. She said Natasha Tynes is the one who was on the Metro. She was the passenger. She took a photo of this employee and she tweeted it, and this was her comment. When you're on your morning commute and you see at WMATA employee in uniform eating on the train, I thought we're not allowed to eat on the train. This is unacceptable. Hope at WMATA responds. When I asked the employee about this, her response was, worry about yourself. And I'm like, yeah, Right. Worry about yourself. Why are you putting this woman, why are you shaming her in this way? So as I started looking at this more and more, I've decided that this narrative of black food shaming is part of an agenda of anti-black racism at its core. There's something about seeing black people do, whether it's us barbecuing in a park, whether we're in a coffee shop waiting for friends, whether we're getting groceries out our car in a neighborhood that somehow people feel we shouldn't be in. And I began to ask, what is it about seeing black people and us eating and enjoying our food? And I do think that there's this culture of not wanting to see black joy, quite frankly. We don't want you to be happy. We want you to stay in this space of oppression and depression and oppression and so forth. And so, I felt it was imperative for me to write this book because there's so many examples in here from popular culture. I have The Wire. There's an episode in here about The Wire. For those of you who watch The Wire, when the young folks, how many folks watched The Wire? Did you watch all of it, the entire? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think season 3 or 4 is about the children, right? Okay, so the children win a contest that was set up, and then their mentor takes them to Ruth Chris. And they have this experience where they're like, oh my God, what is this? Can we hurry up and get out of here? And when they get out the restaurant, they're like, immediately take us to McDonald's. But what's interesting is the next day in school, they play it up. They were watching the whole thing, and they were like, yeah, we had all this, and the bill came to this. So it's, again, this sort of way in which black people, children included, we're always in the panopticon. We're watching you while you're watching us. So we're always aware, even if we're not, right out there saying, we may be saying, I don't know what's going on. That's part of a culture of surreptitiousness, right, and of Brer Rabbit, right, comes from a long history. So I talk about all of that in Eating While Black because I think it's important both for black people to reclaim our history and our histories of joy around food, and I need for people to stop feeling like we're infants and so we need other people to police who we are, and how we move about the world. So there's a dual point there. I said a lot.
You said a number of things to come back to, including that point about joy.
Yeah.
And the resistance on our being able to be joyful. And I've seen this in other arenas, and I think it's interesting the way now you are tying it in terms of food, because you saw it. Serena just retired, so you look back over the careers of Serena and Venus Williams, and early on, not anymore because, they've proven how legendary they are. But you saw in early years these little things, well, they shouldn't be taking tournaments off, or they shouldn't look that way, or this, that, and the whole list of things that will push back against them. Right. Like, can you let these two young ladies be great that they are, in resistance to joy? I even think in terms of even one's own home and possessions and properties. I have a friend in grad school, classmate, who was accused and sent to federal prison for basically they accused her of theft of federal contracts, and she was saying, no, the people under me stole them, and you can fuss me out for not having caught them, but I didn't take part in it. But of course, judges didn't want to listen to that and that type of thing. And I went to the sentencing hearing, and the judge is going on about how she and her husband had paintings and artwork and cars and what have you, and it was like, how dare you actually have these things? How dare you be black and successful and actually want to have artwork on your wall? You must have stolen the contracts. That's the only way you were going to get them. And so this thing about resistance to joy, and you're relating it to food, is a whole new thing. You also talked about, you gave the example of how the person was portrayed and put into social media and that type of thing. And media manipulation certainly plays into it, and I'd be interested in hearing some more about your thoughts on that. I'm wearing a T-shirt now that says critical media literacy, which there is a lack of
Yeah.
in the country generally.
Yeah.
And when there's a lack of that as far as us as black folk and how we live, that plays into it. Where else do you see this media manipulation as far as us and food is concerned?
Yeah, it's everywhere. The ways in which, well, we see it still, as I mentioned, in advertisement. You see it a lot in advertisement. You know, I haven't seen it recently, but one of the other things that happened that led me to building houses was the advertisement of a party on Martin Luther King's birthday using a 40-ounce of beer, a collard green leaf, and a bucket of chicken. So, I mean, here's one of the things, right? When President Obama won the White House the first time, you all may remember this, a postcard was circulating that had watermelons on the South Lawn. Right? Did you all, any of you all see this? Okay, some of you saw. Okay, it was re-forwarded by a mayor out in California. And he was subsequently fired because so many people complained. So I don't really buy this notion. I don't know how this came to be. How did we name something Obama chicken? I don't know where it came from. There's a place that it came from. There's some place that we have in our historical memory associated black people with chicken and watermelon, right? But we eat more than that. We eat more than chicken and watermelon. We eat a lot of different things, and we don't eat a lot of different things, right? Not because we can't, but because we all have taste palettes, right? And so I need for folks to just kind of move us out of these boxes where, as I said, I used to get approached a lot about how can we help people stop eating at McDonald's? You know, and my response is, you know, not to be flippant, but why is that our concern? Really? Why are we concerned about where other people are eating? Because the reality is that as your income increases, most people eat out. You may not be eating at McDonald's, but you may be eating at Cava, or you're eating at some steakhouse, or you're eating, you know, over here, you're eating, but it's only often when black folks or poor people are eating in places that we think are unacceptable, then we feel a need to step in and police those actions. When in reality, I like folks to stop for a moment and think about the fact that food is part of the world of objects. Food is as important to people as your clothes, your mask, your phones, the things you have in your home, the things you surround yourself with. So when you talk about taking away someone's food culture, you may as well tell them you're shutting the door. And I don't think we think about food in that way because we don't think about our relationship to the material world in that way, right? But if you go home tonight and you walk in your door, most of us would be able to tell something's out of place. Somebody's been in here. There's an energy in the room, or there's a lack of an energy, or I visually see something missing. It's the same kind of thing when you tell people you have to stop doing X. I was at one of the stories I share is, and I have to be very clear that this is not just white to black. This is also within black communities because class plays a huge role in this, right? The sort of moralism that I'm a pescatarian, I'm a vegetarian, I'm a vegan, I'm a breatharian, I'm a whatever you are, you know, because we're comfortable with labels, and that's fine. It's fine, whatever you do. My thing is be careful about inserting what you do onto someone else because food choices are very complex. And on a regular basis, most of us, all of us, I would say, make a million decisions every day around food, whether they're conscious or unconscious, from what do I have to eat, how do I prepare it, when am I going to have time to prepare it, have the children eaten, does my spouse eat, did my partner eat, where can I pick up food, how can I drop off food, will it spoil, the range of things we go through. So for us to try and police other people's eating is really problematic because we don't know what other folks are doing every day in their lives.
And so rolling with that, there's a couple things in there. So as a vegan eater, I go to a local regional chain, I won't mention the name right now, where I love the selection, I love what they have, I love what I can get. I can walk out satisfied with what I can get. I also know that many people can't get to one of these.
Right.
Because there are none around the way
Right.
of this particular chain.
Right.
There are none in the hood, all right? That's even before you get the potential cost factors and what have you. So you just touched on a minute in terms of even the ability,
Right.
from a class standpoint, a low income standpoint, to access certain types of food. So in a pushing health culture, you know, and I'll be transparent. I'm that person that talks to my family and friends about, okay, I want you to try to eat blah, 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 you know, in terms of especially being plant-based and what have you. But in a culture that does that, do you see a lack of the attendant systemic justice issues that say, okay, if we're talking about eating plant-based, are we talking about the reasons why folk cannot access plant-based food and the reasons why folk cannot afford plant-based food? Where is the conversation around that? Or is there enough of a conversation?
Absolutely. People can't access food, plant or otherwise, right? We know this in low-income communities and black communities, access to food. And where do people access food, right? So it's two parts to that question. Yes, and we need to work and fight to change those systems of inequality. And how do people eat in the meantime? So my last chapter is eating in the meantime. Because we have to be able to survive while we're waiting for the change to come, right? We've always had to survive while we're waiting for the change to come, right? So I was at a talk up in Massachusetts, and a woman who works with elderly people was saying that a lot of her clients would not take their medication because they didn't have access to food. So now you're having to choose between, do I eat or do I take my medication? And having two aged parents in their 80s, I'm very much, and a child who's 18 who deals with some, mental health. I'm always, did you eat? Did you eat? Did you take your medicine? And so, and then I have, both of them neither one of them wants to eat. Okay, so now we have a compounded problem, right? And so it's not just about accessing plant-based, that's important. And I want us to empower people to feel like if they need to go to a bodega or a corner store or a dollar store or whatever, that they can also do that. So both and. Can we access plant and also shop over here because it's more affordable? I have $20, I can at least buy 18 things. So that's the conversation. My book is not to draw conclusions. I'm trying to open up the conversation so that we are not looking in terms of dichotomies, but that we're allowing people to eat lots of different ways. And here's where this comes down to health for me. Enslavement of black people was for centuries. You all have 1619 Project, for anybody who doesn't know it. It's right there on the shelf. I urge you to buy it and read it. Slavery lasted for centuries. Enslaved people came to this country with vast knowledges of agriculture, of harvesting, of viticulture. We came with all kinds of knowledges, many of which we passed down over generations, many of which we learned the hard way through brutality and so forth over generations. Coming out of enslavement, we didn't have an infrastructure. When Juneteenth happened, while we're running around now celebrating that, you had people passing out. You have slave narratives that talk about people that just fell out. They didn't know what to do. So what do I do? Where do I go? Where's my mama? Where's my daddy? Where are my children? Where are my people, right? We came out of enslavement into Reconstruction, the nadir of black society. It was even worse in some cases coming out of Reconstruction. Then we moved into Jim Crow. Then we had mass lynching to keep us from being politically active. Then we had civil rights. Now we're revisiting all of those issues. How dare we blame food for killing black people? How dare we put that heavy lifting on food when this country has systemically, institutionally, deliberately tried to kill us every single day of our lives? Food is a small part, because while you're focused on the food, they can continue those systems that keep us bound, whether it's healthcare or the lack thereof, whether it's the lack of education in Prince George's County, which is abysmal, in Baltimore City, which is abysmal. While you focused on my food, I can't get my kids to take any classes because it's too hot in the classroom. While you focused on the food, I got children down here with massive mental health issues that should not be in classrooms. They should be in special settings where they can get the attention that they need. But keep telling me it's the food that's killing us. And I would again remind you that over centuries of trauma, we haven't even begun the healing process. So we have got to stop laying all this weight on a set of objects that in many instances, especially if you factor in people who have migrated to this country, foods that sustain them, red oil, palm oil, avocado, dried fish, fufu, you name it, TZ, foods that you cannot access locally. So when we talk about eat local, buy local, blah, blah, what about the people for whom local food doesn't grow here? Lemongrass or, plantain, or what, I don't know when's the last time we could grow a plantain here in this area. So we just need to be more cognizant, I think, of how we are, having these conversations.
That would seem to me a good time to, perhaps if you can for us, read something from that particular chapter. It's a low down, dirty shame, Food and Anti-Black Racism.
Yes, it's a low down. So that's chapter, let me see here. That's why I bring my book, because I can't remember anything. So in chapter 1, where I talk about a number of different ways in which we see shame taking place, one of the things I start with was being at a museum in Philadelphia and hearing a Black History talk. And the speaker was a young white woman, and the chef was an African-American man, and he was in the back preparing a vegan meal for this Black History program. And she started out with her presentation, and she started talking about scraps. That, this is why Black people have eaten the food that they've eaten, because they all ate scraps. So after a while, the hair on the back of your neck starts, what the heck? So, I asked her, I said, where did you get your information? And she said, the internet. We're talking about 2013, so that meant a whole plethora of things had been published by then. And so I said, a lot of this information is inaccurate, and it's also drawn from a very specific period of enslavement, and that's the 19th century. But you're talking about other centuries as well. So here's the last thing I'll say about this. When we were brought to this country, as I said, we had vast knowledges. You have to remember, we weren't coming into enslavement like it is outside right now. We were surrounded by forest. So you mean to tell me, if I have agricultural knowledge and I'm surrounded by forestry, and I know how to identify berries, and I know how to identify nuts, and I know how to identify weeds, I'm not going to eat from the things I know? I'm just going to starve and only eat what you gave me? Not to mention, I know how to trap, I know how to fish, I know how to hunt, I know how to do, and I can hunt without weapons that you think I should have. So you mean to tell me Black people didn't take advantage of that, and we only ate what you gave us, or we just didn't tell you we were eating? Right? So that's how low down dirty shame starts, because it is a shame that so much of what we know about Black people's food cultures comes from what we read on the internet. There's a lot of misinformation. And then I just want to read this other thing for you, that I also talk in here about Katrina, because it felt like to me that during Katrina, one of the things we didn't talk a lot about is how people sustained themselves when they were forcibly relocated, and I talk about food being that, that sort of saving grace for a lot of people. And so, again, I'm looking at the ways in which we actually do way more things with food than we are acknowledged for, and we don't need credit. We just need you to be clear that we know what we're doing. So on page 92, I just want to share this with you, because one of the ways that black folks are repeatedly fed these stories that are untrue is through Bibles, right? And so a lot of black folks have been told that they are the children of Ham, and so you're cursed as a generation. Many of us have heard that story, right? And so Pastor John, is it Henry? John Henry Wesley, over at Alfred Street Baptist Church, Howard John Wesley at Alfred Street Baptist Church in Virginia, had this to say, and I really like it, and so I'm just going to read it. It's just a short paragraph. But he talks about the notion of sacralization. And it's when a group of people with a vested interest take a particular ideology or historical phenomena and recast it as biblical in order to give it justification. So you have an ideology, you recast it as biblical to give it strength. So he said, so with sacralization, you can kill 1 million Jews in the Holocaust and say it's the will of God, because the Jews killed Jesus. Through sacralization, you can convince yourself that it's all right to eradicate Native Americans and their tribes and put them in reservations while you steal their land, and you call it manifest destiny, because you liken yourself to Israel and America is your promised land. Through sacralization, you can oppress LGBTQIA+, because you have a distorted understanding of the word abomination. And through sacralization, you can endorse the enslavement, the torture, the lynching, and the killing of African people and support apartheid because you believe in the curse of Ham, which, of course, Ham was never cursed. It was Ham's grandson that was cursed. So all of us who are walking around thinking, I'm part of a cursed generation, we need to retract that. And you need to do your work for yourself and know that you need to worry about yourself.
So much there, and I'm so glad that you went to that also. Ministry is part of my background, so I've seen just what you're talking about over and over
I'm a
again.
PK.
Yeah, there you go. So you already know. You already know.
Yes.
And it's frustrating, and again, fascinating the ways in which you're drawing this through lens of food. But you also, on the flip side, on the more positive side, there's something you said that reminded me of, the days when, and we, especially those of us in our community, we've all had this experience. We go over to your friend's house or something or another, and the adults of that house are going to make sure you eat. You ain't leaving.
Right, until you eat.
Until you eat and eat well.
Right.
I can remember in gospel choir down at American University, we had just come back from singing somewhere, and in dropping off one of the members at their house, and we all came in the living room, and her mother got to cooking and this, that, and the other.
Right.
I don't even know why there was enough food in the house for the lot of us.
Right.
And we started eating one round of this, and we were trying to hold back. Put some food on your plate. You ain't got no food on your plate.
Right.
When there was more. And then there was another round of this, and then she sent somebody down to the store to get some more of that. And there's always been this sense of it. Today we would call it mutual aid, in today's parlance.
Right.
But there's always been a sense of that, especially with
Taking care
food,
of.
where you were going to be taken care of, even on pain of how much, or how much it's a hardship for us, or how little that we have.
Right.
And that type of thing. And it's something that you said that really makes me think of our history of use of food in that way.
So on an uplifting note, I also talk about going to farmers markets, okay? And I talk about there being a difference. And one of the things that I share is, I go to a lot of different farmers markets, and I immediately know if there's any black food energy. That's what I call it, black food energy. How do you know? Well, there's nothing wrong with grass-fed beef, and there's nothing wrong with kohlrabi. And this one that I talk about had a lot of kohlrabi. Like everybody had kohlrabi for some reason. What I didn't see was cabbage. I didn't see corn. I didn't see, carrots. I didn't see green onions. I didn't see collard greens, kale, greens that we've been eating all our lives, right? I didn't see any jewelry. I didn't hear any music. I didn't see the incense, the things that give a lot of black farmers markets the energy that black folk tend to move around in, right? When I go to a market and none of the vendors look like me, and I immediately, my head starts hurting because I'm like, I feel like I'm in a sterile environment. And it's not one that's necessarily welcoming to me. I had this experience this past Monday, not on the subject of food, but my bank was, soliciting for, folks to come and get some financial advice. So I did, and so the young African-American woman who was assisting me said, well, let me send you to our webpage so that you can find one of these advisors. And the first 3 people on the page were white men. And then I scrolled further down, and then I started reading bios, and then I said, okay. So I said, yeah, I'm gonna probably go somewhere else. And she said, why? I said, there's nothing here that says that you can capture my experience as a single mom of a child who has various needs, who may or may not have the wherewithal to manage the money and these large portfolios, okay? I was like, I don't see that here. But I have this other page over here where the woman immediately says, I'm a mom, I'm a professional, I'm an entrepreneur. So I know she knows struggle in a way that I know struggle, you see. And so you go back to the media presence and the messaging. That's messaging. So they called me first thing Monday and said, we want to talk to you about our website. And so they don't know I'm about to charge them for anything. Right. But the point really is
yesterday's price is not today's price.
Not today's price, yeah. Today is Friday. I mean, but really, how we message and say welcome, because I have a piece in here from someone from a Baltimore farmer's market, a man who said, when I come to the market, I have a sense of belonging. I know where my stall is. I know where I'm going. And I'm like, yes, I want a sense of belonging too. But I can't do that if everything here says these are not the foods that I eat, right? Now we have a problem. And so when you're creating a farmer's market in a community that you're saying, I want the black community to come, I want the Latina community, I want the Asian community to come, I want whomever to come, and you're situated over here and you don't have the foods that are germane to their food cultures, they're probably not coming. Because why? What are they going to eat? So I just kind of, again, my goal with this book is to open up conversations. I'm not trying to tell you what you need to do, but what I am sort of suggesting is you probably don't need to police the actions and the bodies and the lives and the minds of black people around food.
So much of that points to a question in my mind. We started to touch on it a little bit earlier, and it goes back to the anecdote in the first chapter in terms of that dinner and black chef in the back and white presenter out front and all that. It goes back to what we were talking about in terms of systemic change for people to be able to eat, especially even before you talk about can they eat plant-based and what have you.
Right.
Given the crucial role of imagery that you just described, I'm looking for that fine walk and that fine line of balance whereby I'm going back to, I'm putting my plant-based hat on again, where we can live that and offer that in some way that is not entrapped in the disparaging and disdainful whiteness that you rightfully talk about, that you describe. Okay, you just talked about the website where the first 3 picks have nothing to do with people of color. So why is somebody going to go further into the site? I watch a lot of vegan documentaries, and 90% of the people in there are all white.
Yeah.
you know. My friend and I will be sitting there waiting. How many minutes we in? 30 minutes we ain't seen no black folk. 40 minutes we ain't seen no Asian Pacific folk. 50 minutes we ain't seen no. Good info in the doc.
Good
Love
info.
the info. That's why we watch them. But half the time shaking our heads like, damn, no wonder so many of our folk laughing at this as just that white thing, because where did it, we don't see us, you know, in some of these things.
We do eat vegetarian.
We do
eat plant-based,
we
right?
are, you
we
know,
are.
and folk making moves. I can't think of the producer that did Invisible Vegan. You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, because I'm in that documentary.
Right. You were there. And so,
Mm-hmm.
say some more on that. We were chit-chatting
Right.
beforehand, and you mentioned that you had just done an event with Brian Terry. If you all
Right.
are not familiar with him, Afro Vegan and his other books, very good, and we have them. It just general thoughts in terms of how do we step out of that one part stereotype, one part actual capturing of a white culture that talks about promoting health but does everything else that we're talking about racistly, disparagingly, systemically,
Right.
you know.
Well, you know, black people have always eaten off the land. We have. I mean, we work the land. We've always eaten off the land. I remember sitting on my front porch in rural Virginia, and my aunt would amble down off the hill and go into the woods next door, not afraid of snakes or anything else. She'd just go in there with her brown paper bag and come back out about 45 minutes later with the bag full of pokeweed, because she was going to make poke salad, you know, and she taught me, of course, you have to know how to cook poke because it'll kill you if you don't, right? But one day she told me, she and I were sitting there, and she said, you know, because she did days work. She was domestic, so she did days work, and she said, and every morning she got up and she would lay out the table in bone china and so forth for just her and her husband, right? And my cousin, so she said, while she was doing that, she was talking to me, she said, you know, you can't, this was back in the 80s, she said, you can't eat now like you used to could off the land. You can't. She was like, it'll kill you, because we used to could kill a hog and, you know, have some greens and this and that and this, and then just, you know, sop it up with some bread, but you can't do that now because it will kill you. Okay, so from that I took, they ate off the land, sweet potatoes, and like I said, carrots, and, you know, tomatoes and corn, and my mom always talks about butter beans and corn. That's her thing, you know, butter beans, succotash, you know, or what have you. So we've always eaten off the land. The thing is, we've not made it appealing as a society for black people to eat off the land, because when we talk vegan and vegetarian, we're often not talking about the foods that are familiar to us. But that doesn't mean we don't eat them. Everlasting Life over here around the Beltway, in DC, and certainly you all have restaurants up here in Baltimore, you know, have foods that are familiar. And also people, we have to remember that we're talking about taste. Taste. Things have to taste good, right? I was telling my colleague on the way up here that, yes, I was with Brian Terry last week, and many of us left the function upset about the food choices, because the second day we were at a farm that was a grass-fed beef farm, producing farm. And so the meal was, they had to bring in a lot of African American chefs, black chefs, brought the food in. And so we ended up having each item brought out to us separately. So they started with a salad, and I was saying to Mary, there was something very wild in the salad. You know how you can taste the wild grass or something? There was something in it that maybe was elevated by the particular dressing they used or what have you. And I love salad. That's my thing. Arugula, all that. But something about it reminded me of the weeds we used to pick as children and be walking around, you know. I was like, what is this in my salad? I felt like Letitia in the book. What is this in my salad? But anyhow, so we had this salad. Then we had vegan muffins. And then we had some grilled vegetables, and with a fresh pesto sauce. Haven't tasted a better one. But my daughter was like, yeah, I don't like the vegetables because there's too many different textures. There was grilled avocado, then we had carrot, then there may have been some sweet potato, then there was they didn't really quite go together, right? Then out of nowhere we got black beans. And we weren't really sure because there was no rice. So there were black beans. So what are we supposed to do? Then there was mac and cheese. Then there were greens that weren't seasoned, but they had all of this hot peppers on top. And then we had one more thing, and as we were sitting there, a huge platter of pork was brought up because he was showcasing some of the grill mastering in Oakland. No one at the table ate pork. So you had a whole platter of pork that just sat there. So we were like, what's going on here, Brian? Come on. So, but my point there is taste. It's a beautiful picture. I mean, I have the picture. I'm going to probably put it on my website because they were like, promote it. So I'm going to put the pictures because it's a beautiful picture. But there was a taste factor. It wasn't seasoned in the ways that the mac and cheese was, but nothing else was. And I think we often forget that people have taste buds. So while you're saying you should eat this, you should eat that, you should eat this, that, and the other, but how is it going to taste? Like when I grew up eating okra, the slimy kind. Because when we were really young, my dad was diagnosed with diabetes, so we went to Meatless Mondays before that was a thing. We had tuna fish Tuesdays, okay, and we had to have tuna on a bed of lettuce. That was our dinner, along with peas with pearl onions in it. And then we would have okra days, and it was slimy, right? It wasn't until I was in graduate school that I even thought about chopping up fresh okra with tomatoes and onions and pan fry with some red oil. Now I have a whole different taste and relationship to okra than eating slime. So again, we have to be very clear about the foods that are going to taste good to us and also be good for us.
And you made me think of my own experience in terms of, in recent years, discovering foods that I didn't necessarily like before. Mm-hmm. But in different ways. Mm-hmm. Like I was that, I jokingly say I was that one black person who didn't grow up liking greens. I betrayed my whole West African culture there because I didn't. Right. And it just, there was some that I ranked above others. I'd rather deal with kale than collards, rather deal with collards than spinach. And it wasn't until recent years of actually, as you say, taking them fresh, chopping them, salading them, blending them, what have you, mm-hmm. that I'd fall in love with them, mm-hmm. And you talk about okra, and of course you make me think of my great grandmother, okra, mm-hmm. as she used to talk, yes. Would put the Y on it, that's okra.
Yes.
But yeah, and things like that, as you say, chop them up and doing it different ways. And what you're saying to me is that when we feel empowered to be the creative people that we have always been, mm-hmm. then we can take things that are maybe old traditions or done certain ways and done new ways. And that leads us into new creative paths.
Absolutely.
And as far as this whole plant-based thing, that will be crucial because, as you say, when we're creative, we make it taste good.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Yeah. But if we don't want it bland, going back to the stereotypes, mm-hmm. back before we wanted season and whatnot, right. For whatever stereotype or degree of truth there might be in there, don't bring it bland, do something with it. Right. Put your foot in it.
Right, put your foot
as
in
old
it.
folk used to say.
Right. Because remember, potato salad, mac and cheese, and potato salad, mac and cheese, and what else am I thinking? And collard green. I mean, that's a vegetarian meal. But when we tell people, oh, you can't eat this, you got to be careful, you've taken away an entire heritage, right? I remember one of our admin people back when I was in grad school said, but mac and cheese is not a black food. I said, no, it's not. It's a casserole. But when I put it with this, and this, it becomes a black dish, you see. And so I want to make it very clear, I'm not speaking against people having gardens or farming. I have tons of sage and basil and stuff right now, and chives and stuff on my balcony. But that's what I can grow, you see. That's what I can grow. But where we run into some problems, I think, is when we think everybody needs to be a grower. I heard this yesterday on NPR or on some show that I was listening to. And they were like, we need some people who can harvest. We need some people who can sell. We need some people who can cook. We need some people who know how to, harvest seeds. Everybody doesn't have to be able to grow. because everybody can't necessarily grow. And we end up pushing people away when we say, you need to do this, oh, you need to do, oh, you need, or you gay if you eat like that, or you this if you eat like that. Or we need to let people be. And maybe when they see the changes in us, then they may be more inclined to do a thing. Mm-hmm. I am not at all saying that we shouldn't eat differently because we disproportionately, as black people, deal with various health diseases. Absolutely. What I'm saying is put that also in conversation with the fact that I could wake up tomorrow, as I've said numerous times before, you've heard me say this, I can wake up tomorrow and be shot in my house because I'm black, because I'll get mistaken for being somebody that I'm not supposed to be. So my diet is not necessarily going to be the thing that may kill me, okay? So that's why when the man at the corner store says, I'm going to eat this chicken, and I'm going to eat it with all this salt, because I could walk out here right now and get hit by a car and die, or even worse, get picked up by the cops and y'all will never see me again. So when we think about how black people look at scale in the grand scheme of things and how we can easily be killed by a stoplight versus eating some chicken, that may be the thing that we're going to gravitate toward, right? And I think we do ourselves a disservice when we don't give people the benefit of the doubt that they've thought about these things. You know, when we just say, as you know, and I love Byron Hurt's work, but he did Soul Food Junkies, which shames so many people, you know. And yet now we have High on the Hog, which tells us there's a whole culture of barbecuing and tailgating that goes together that's part of black culture and heritage. So we have to think about scale. How much do you want to shame people, and how much do you just want to say, well, maybe we're going to change the diet a little bit, and we're going to add this in there, and we're going to add that in there, and we're going to do this. But when you think about the constellation of things that could kill us tomorrow as black people in this country, food is actually a very small part, unless we eat something poisonous or that's been left out for days or what have you.
I know you all have some thoughts and some questions brewing in your minds. I'm about to go get our handheld microphone so that we can bring it around to some folk. And while I do that, I would ask you to maybe dip into the book again and whatever part. We've touched on all of those chapters up and down in various ways. We could talk all night about these things. But whatever passage you may want to get into, and I'm going to go get our handheld mic so we can do some Q&A.
Okay, great. I do just want to share with you all a little bit more about the story of Latricia, because for me, she's a very important part of this story. And those of you who blessed me to buy the book, you will also see my daughter is very well represented in this book, because she was coming of age as I was writing. And she had an experience at school where her gym teacher, their health teacher, in Prince George's County, so majority black school, the kids had the girls and boys get on the scale in front of each other. And then afterwards, he told them, and she told this story after a talk I gave, and completely surprised me. I had heard it before, but I didn't realize how much it stuck with her. She said when they got off the scale, he turned to them and said, most of you are not going to be here because you're obese. You're going to die. And so recently I wrote a piece for Teen Vogue, and I'm like, I remember having to try to climb that crazy rope in the presidential thing, and rope burns, hands, and feeling completely like, you know, oh my God, I'm a failure, you know, because I can't because I can't do that, or I can't do push-ups, or I can't. And I said, first of all, why are we having girls and boys get on a scale in the midst of everyone else and show their weight? And then you've got little black girls and boys, many of the girls of whom are shapely. My daughter's birth family, they're shapely, you know. And from that point on, she was very much ashamed. And then she would take to school to eat, you know, some of the food that her dad would make, which would be spinach sauce with a goosey or gari or whatever, because West African, Ghanaian dad. And people would be like, oh my God, that's why you're gonna die, you know. And then she got even more shame that she couldn't eat the things that was sustained. So I think we have to just be careful about these conversations. She said one time she was in the lunch line, I don't think I put this in the book, but she was in the lunch line, the last story I'll tell, and she said the little girl in front of her apparently didn't have enough money or didn't have the money, and the lunch lady told her, well, you're gonna have to eat a cheese sandwich since you don't have no money. So my daughter slipped a $20 bill because her dad had just given it to her for school. And the girl, and the lady was like, no, don't be doing it. She was like, I don't need it. And so she gave the girl the $20. And she said, Mom, I just wanted to do something because the girl, she felt bad. So I think we just need to think about how children are watching us in these stories and they're internalizing this stuff, and they can grow up to then still have issues. And it's not just girls, it's boys too, with body image. So the story of Latricia in here is really important for me, and I hope it becomes important for you, because there's so many other subtexts that the Washington Post did not delve into as to why this young girl, maybe 12 years old, weighing 200 and some pounds, potentially wearing the same clothes every day, living in a new environment with a person who's not a parent, but is her caregiver. And I began to ask, is she in foster care? Where are her people? Could she be living out a trauma that is being shown on her body because her underclothes are ill-fitting? So just if you read the story, I hope that you'll walk away with the same levels of compassion and empathy that I felt when I was writing her story.
Excellent. We invite questions or comments. We ask that you keep them rather truncated. We could definitely go all night with some of these things. We ask you to keep them relatively straightforward, and we will take a few questions.
Ken, I just want to apologize to everybody ahead of time because I got a lot to say. Hi.
Hi.
So good to meet you. My name is Brenda. I actually do food justice activism in Baltimore. Mm-hmm. And just a little bit of background, I grew up in the projects of Baltimore City and Cherry Hill. Mm-hmm. And, growing up, there were certain things that were just normalized. Mm-hmm. When you turn 40, you get high blood pressure. You get high blood pressure. When you turn 50, you have diabetes. 55, you heart disease, and then it just, and so like by the time you're 65, you have your first heart attack, and that was just normal. And so that's what I saw growing up, and you just expect that that's going to happen to you too. And I just happened to be, back in 2011, I happened to be at this community community meeting. Mm-hmm. And there were some kids from Johns Hopkins, mm-hmm. and they were coming to be helpful. Mm-hmm. And they were talking about this study that had come out recently, mm-hmm. that it was comparing a white affluent neighborhood in Baltimore City to a black low-income community, very close to each other. And they said that they studied the two and the health outcomes mm-hmm. of these two communities. And what they found was that the people in the black community lived 20 years less. Yes. The white affluent folks had 20-year longer life expectancy. But the folks who were doing the study, they were surprised that food was the major difference between the two groups. And that really struck me. At the time, I had already been eating a plant-based diet for years, but it really struck me, and that made me think about where I grew up, and we didn't have a grocery store and those kinds of things, at least not where I grew up in Cherry Hill. We had the bus, mm-hmm. and the bus just basically sold the worst stuff. And looking back, the foods that my mother would cook were the foods that her mother would cook, and and so it just wasn't healthy at all. Right. And so I decided in that moment at this community meeting that I was going to do something, yeah. Right? And so I decided to just start doing cooking demos, because it was I've been cooking, for all this time. I've been cooking this plant-based food. I'm going to show other people how to cook this food. Yeah. People told me, you shouldn't do this. Because I decided to go back to where I came from, sure. In terms of marginalized mm-hmm. black communities. At the furthest margins. Mm-hmm. So I understand. I understand. And people told me, don't do it. Those people don't care about their health. They're never going to, eat it. They're never going to change their diets. You're just wasting your time. And what I found as I started out in the churches and the community centers, and eventually ended up with my own community center, where we would do these events where we were doing cooking demos and stuff, and we would get hundreds of people sure. that would show up. Absolutely. And what I found was that those people couldn't have been what they were saying couldn't have been
been
further
true.
from the truth.
Yeah.
We had families coming in, we had
That's right.
elders coming in, we had young mothers who wanted to
That's
make
right.
something different for their families.
That's right.
And coming through our programs and, watching my workshops and cooking demos and stuff like that. And so, but there were always detractors. So people who would say like, oh, you're shaming people. Oh, you're, like all these things. And it was never judgmental. It was never like I was telling people don't
No.
do this and don't do that. It was just like, if you want some information, I got the information. If you want to change, if you want to do something different, then here's the resources.
Right.
And now I have an entire organization,
Awesome.
where
As you should.
we help, we've now helped thousands and thousands of people.
Absolutely.
And so my question to you, because I also catch a lot of flack for what I'm doing. It's like, don't tell people what to eat and that kind of thing. And so I wanted to ask you, like, do you think that there's a place for Black people, because no offense, but I don't care what white people have to say about our diet, about what we're doing. I really don't. Like, I don't even deal with anybody other than us because, I was watching your videos and like talking back to you on the screen. I was like, well, hold up. So I'm glad to be able to like talk to you in person. But one of the things you said was mind your business, right? Like you said that very clearly. And I thought to myself and said to you on the screen, my community is my business. Yeah. And so I am minding my business.
Then I'm not talking to you.
You're not
Right.
talking to me. Okay. I mean,
because you're doing what you're supposed to do, right? I believe in a Black liberation, freedom struggle.
yeah,
Until we are free, none of us are free.
absolutely.
You keep doing the work that you're doing. You're showing people options. You're giving people freedom and liberation. You can be in there making biscuits, but you're still showing people another option. Here's the thing about that study. You started out saying, I'm from Cherry Hill. Does Cherry Hill look today like it did 20 years ago? Does it look better?
No.
And there is your answer right there. Like I said, how dare you? Yes, people are dying at 40, 50, 60. Look at the deplorable conditions, from rodents to bad infrastructure, to state violence, to community violence, because people are angry, because people are traumatized. You're giving people options and hope in food. So you're right, I'm not talking to you, because you are minding the business that you're supposed to mind, which is your community.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I love that question and I love that answer. And I was mentioning to you that I wasn't sure if some of our local leaders were going to be able to get here. This is one of them, so I'm so glad that Brenda was able to get here in terms of some of our local Black food justice leaders and plant-based leaders.
That's right.
Did I see another hand?
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for what you offer and share to us.
Sure.
It's appreciated. I know Ken gave us clear instructions about short questions, but by way of commentary, I just want to talk about the touch points that you conjured. Growing up as in school, there was a subset of racial insults, and I was just thinking somehow just being here tonight stimulated how replete the different terms and the different choices of food. Or maybe a counterpunch is, for instance, we were eaters of kale and mustard greens. Nobody in the mainstream wanted to eat those things
That's right.
until it was found out it was healthy.
Right.
Then it gets gentrified and
Right,
priced
right.
out of reach.
Right.
Just a remark.
Yes, of course.
And of course, again, context is everything. And so like, there are no Black farmers, yet we had this hundreds of years of history of tending to land. How do you pull that off? And then in present day, complain about they're getting something special or extra when the program was set up to help all farmers to
Right.
begin with.
Right.
Just, I mean, all these are commentaries,
Right.
quite frankly. So the culture has a larger reach than we think. And when you engage people's culture, manipulate it and insult it, there are consequences all over the place, physical, social, political, and the like.
That's right.
Sorry
Look,
about the comment.
No, you're fine. Look, my friend Will, and his partner have heard me say this over and over. If Black people came together in the struggle for liberation, en masse, we would be a force that this country could not reckon with. And they know that. That's why when they freed us, they did everything they could to keep us from getting political power. See, sometimes we don't recognize our power as communities. You all have the power to change Cherry Hill, but nobody will ever tell you that. And I tell you that, look at the video of Bayview, Virginia, and Alice Coles. Bayview, Virginia, they were going to bring a prison to Bayview. This community that had no running water, no plumbing, no electricity in the 90s, in the late 1990s. I found this video when I was teaching at McDaniel, Alice Coles and Bayview. It's a 60-minute documentary they talk about. They were going to bring this prison, the Audubon Society, and Alice Coles, the moms in this community said, oh, no, 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 no. You're not, our children are suffering already. You're not going to put a prison in I-View so that we have a school-to-prison pipeline. You're not going to do it. So they blocked the prison from coming in Virginia. It's about 25 miles from Virginia Beach, Bayview. Alice said, oh, wait, if we could stop them from building a prison, we can make them build us some houses. They came together. They found black architects. They found a black general contractor. They got grants, blah, 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 and changed Bayview. You had people in their 80s, in 1998, not realizing you could control electricity from a switch on the wall. If we understood our political power and our resilience, but see, that's right now why we have all these attacks against critical race theory, which we know doesn't exist anymore. But that's why folks don't want us to have our history. Because if we knew our history and the forcefulness with which we actually could mobilize and change society, black liberation, that's a thing. So yes, continue to do what you're doing, and like you said, pointing out these various ways in which black farmers, we've been farming the land for years, you know. The one case didn't quite touch everyone, and right now my friend Gail Myers, if you Google her, M-Y-E-R-S, has a fabulous documentary. She's making the rounds right now talking about black farmers, and she interviews a number of women and men, and they can tell you the stories of being fifth-generation farmers. And it's such a powerfully moving documentary, so that you know that plant-based life is in our blood. It's just how we're being presented it in the media that right now is showing us something different.
Crucial point. Two more questions.
Hello, doctor.
Hi.
Good to see you again.
You too.
Again, we're not stalking you. I mean, we saw you in D.C. and
I appreciate you
Politics
all.
and Prose, and because this is so important, and
Right.
I think I so appreciate you leaning into that idea about the power and recognizing the power that we have, because there's so much that's happening now, and I'm here in Baltimore, I live in D.C., but I know the work of Reverend Heber Brown, right, and the Food Justice Network that's happening right here in Baltimore.
Right
It's
here
not
in
being
Baltimore.
supported by people oftentimes that are right here in the community. I work in philanthropy, and I know philanthropy is not running over itself to support that kind of work, but that's the power.
Yes.
That we make a way out of no way and do that work. And so because this book is so important and this work is so important, and people are just now coming to terms with it, I know what's happening in D.C., markets are starting to open in food apartheid neighborhoods. I'm thinking that there's this movement that can't be stopped. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, as you're talking about this work, as this work is getting so much attention, what are some of the elements of the experience that you are leaning in on that you appreciate as a result of this work? And then also, what are some of the challenges that you're facing from some of the pushback that you're getting?
Yeah, that's a great question. My days of activist work, I grew up in that kind of household. My dad said I'm a PK, but he's the social action minister. So we grew up doing all kinds of work in the community, and I'm only realizing it now that a lot of it was around food distribution, trying to help people think about meal planning and so forth, some of the things you're talking about. I'm not doing that work anymore. I find myself in a position of trying to more write in ways that are accessible to people so I can break things down. I do a lot of podcasts. I tend not to turn those away because I just want to talk to people and have people talk to me, like you did in sharing your experience, because I think a lot of times we need to be, I don't want to say validated, but reassured and also in agreement that, yeah, keep doing it, keep moving. Yes, you have to. Not all of us are going to be on a food show, right? But if you can change the mind, the heart, the soul, or feed one child, then we're on top of it, right? So that's all I have right now. My long-term goal, which is really a short-term goal because I'll be at retirement age in a couple of years, is to open a homeschool where part of what I do is teach young people about foodstuffs, right? Because my daughter was homeschooled and the experience was horrendous, and I know the need in PG County, I know the need in the DMV for alternative ways of learning which incorporate how do you navigate a city? How do you navigate? How do you find your resources? How can you get to places where food is served and sold and still be able to make it back home in less than 8 hours, right? Using public transportation if you have to. Maybe developing an app for immigrant communities. Where can you find your foods that are going to sustain you, right? Because I would travel across town with my then husband to get food from the wache lady. Wache is basically rice and red sauce and beans and fried fish. But this woman was working out of her home, right? She's an entrepreneur. She didn't have a license or anything, but everybody in the Ghanaian community by us knew about the wache lady, right? So I wanted to show young people, this is what you can do, right? And these are some of the things you can do with food. Because if you can do it with food, you can do it with something else. That's why I'm suggesting you all take a look at Alice Coles, because if you can do it with food, you can make some other changes in your community as well. So I'm about, that's where I feel my calling is at this moment. And that's the work I try to do, and I try to make that work very accessible so that lots of people know you don't have to give up the corn pudding. You don't have to be able to only eat your greens one way. You may decide one day you want turkey and one day you want liquid smoke. You know, I go every inch of the gambit. I'm all around. I remember telling my sisters, we're going to have some blue corn pancakes. They were like, no, we're going to IHOP because we don't know what that is. Now my sister's a vegan. Okay, so I feel my work is done. I'm not, but she is. Okay, my work is done, all right? So, you know, but and also for us to remain flexible and pliable because we are people. We're human, and we're flexible. And so today we may eat plant-based. Tomorrow we may decide I'm going to add a little something different back to my diet, and you should know that's okay. And there should be no judgment, whether or not you need to take fish oil because you are pregnant, even though you are a vegan. So that's what I think is part of my calling at this moment.
Psyche, what I love about your work, and in particular how you talk about it in the stories that you've read, is about what we're doing to children, and the impacts of the messages. I posted on Facebook the other day an image of a caricature that's roaming social media about the new Little Mermaid trailer.
I saw it, yeah.
And I'm bringing it up because you commented on it.
Yes.
And you commented on it specifically around the whole notion of the fried chicken and the watermelon, which are images that are a part of this particular caricature. And I'm curious for you to talk about, for children, it was my 16-year-old daughter who brought it to my attention. And her comment via text was, "It never ends."
Right.
But I'm not even sure she understood,
Right.
other than this girl is not attractive to her,
Right,
right? But the food piece resonated with me, and I'm curious what you're thinking, or are our children, or what should we be talking about with our children in seeing those types of objects and what it's communicating to them and possibly traumatizing them,
Right.
or re-traumatizing them.
Right, so I'm going to be very short and say, yes, this was an image of the Little Mermaid, but in caricature, right? And she had chicken, a piece of chicken and some watermelon, so it was clear. right, and then there was a piece of watermelon somewhere in the picture, right?
It's supposed to be, instead of a rock.
Right. It's a piece of watermelon, right. So, I mean, right, these images never end, and I think our children need to know that. You need to know that history. Don't shy away from it. And I talk about it in building houses. I give you images of men, women, and children. And I tell you some of the readings behind what were going on. And these things are not discrete, because I would often see a different image but the same caption, or the same image with a different caption, all right? These things still exist. There's a whole Mammy's restaurant right now down in Mississippi, Natchez, Mississippi. So they still exist. So we don't shy away from it. And you don't stop eating chicken and watermelon. Because if you like it, you like it. Now, I'll give you this very, very quick story. I was on a bus trip. Black group of us were going on a ski trip. And we started out leaving DC at like 5 o'clock in the middle of rush hour trying to get to the Poconos. This is many years ago. Crazy trip. Anyhow, the organizer had gotten us boxes of Popeyes. Because you're on a bus trip. What else you gonna eat? Chicken travels well. It's easy. You can eat it, you can discard it. We got up the road and pulled off, not realizing we were gonna pick up a group of folks who were also going to the ski trip right outside the Poconos. The moment the bus pulled up, it was a community of white folks. The moment the bus pulled up, we heard one person say, "It's about time." Immediately, just no conversation, people start gathering up the boxes. We start gathering, putting them in the bag, putting them in the trash. Because they had been standing there for about 3 hours drinking Jell-O shots, alcohol Jell-O shots. And what nobody on that bus wanted was for somebody to come out of their mouth with the wrong thing, because our trip would have been ruined, even more than it already was, because we were tired and we had been in 3 hours of traffic. So there's a way of knowing as black people, because we were all 40-something, so we knew we had to get this because there was about to be some violence on the bus, right? And at the same time, we were practicing something that's germane to us as travel companions. We were watching movies. I think we watched Love Jones. We were having conversation. We were singing, doing all the things you do on a bus trip. And chicken was a natural part of that, right? But we also knew the moment when we had to come together as a collective to preserve the moment so that we didn't avoid any sort of mishaps. So, embrace it, explain it, but don't necessarily shy away from it, is what I would say for our young people. Thank you all so much. I appreciate your coming out.
Thank you, Psyche, for this what I see already is going to be a valuable addition to a set of literature that is looking at the African diaspora vis-a-vis matters of food, matters of farming, matters of land, and all of that. So certainly we encourage you to step over and purchase the book so that you can come up and get it signed by our guests. We encourage you this evening or at some point, especially after we get our doors open, to come and look at the set of literature that is addressing some of these matters, things like black food geographies and farming while black and food justice and all of these things that are adding some crucial words around these matters. If you want to go ahead and get a last coffee drink, that is doable. If you want to go ahead and add some other books from off the shelf along with Eating While Black, that is certainly doable. Yea, even encouraged. You should definitely do that. Please keep an eye out for black preacher, couldn't help it. I'm sorry. It slips out. It slips out. Like great-grandmother's okra. We talk about okra, Please keep an eye out at redms.org at the events tab for things coming up. Perhaps we'll see you Saturday. Perhaps we'll see you Wednesday or Thursday or next week for some of our upcoming events. I'll see you in November for Red Emma's Mother Earth Poetry Vibe. And again, one last big radical round of applause for Dr. Psyche Williams-Forson.